My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old, and I am a pediatric speech therapist in Portland, Oregon. 18 months ago, I sat alone in a hospital recliner on the third floor of Providence Cancer Center, a cold 4-port threaded into my left arm, a bag of fluorouracil dripping steadily into my bloodstream. Chemo session number 38. I watched the door every time I heard footsteps in the hall. I don't know why. By session 38, I knew no one was coming. My father, Gerald Donovan, retired district court judge, community pillar, man of the year in 2019, never once walked through that door. Not once in 41 sessions. Not a phone call. Not a card. Not even a text that said, "I'm thinking about you." He was busy. He was planning his retirement party. 240 guests. A ballroom at the HEATHMAN Hotel. A live jazz quartet. A $14,000 catering order. He called me 7 months into my treatment to ask if I would give the keynote speech about what a great father he'd been. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. What I did instead, he never saw coming. Before I continue, if this story is already hitting something in you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. You don't have to, only if it genuinely means something. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from right now and what time it is there. It helps me more than you know. Now let me take you all the way back to the summer I was 31 and the morning my life changed completely. I grew up in Bend, Oregon, the second of 2 children. My brother, Marcus, was 4 years older than me and was, by every measure our family used, the golden one. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it the way a doctor reads a chart, as observation, not wound. My father, Gerald, was a man who communicated in transactions. Love was conditional. Praise was currency. He distributed both with the precision of a man who'd spent 30 years on the bench deciding who deserved what. Marcus got the college fund. $92,000, fully funded, at Oregon State. He got the car on his 16th birthday, a silver Honda Civic. Not new, but his. He got the fishing trips, the football games, the handshakes at the front door when he came home. He got called son in that particular warm way that meant something. I got told, at 16, that college was a luxury and that I should think practically. I took out $47,000 in student loans to attend the University of Oregon. I paid them off on my own, every cent, by the time I was 29. My mother, Diane, was not cruel. She was something harder to name. She was absent in a present tense way. She sat at dinner tables and stood in school hallways and attended recitals, but her attention was a spotlight that followed my father, wherever he aimed it. She loved me, I believe. She just loved keeping the peace more. When I was 8, I asked my father to come to my school's fall showcase. I was playing a small piano piece, nothing complicated, but I had practiced for 6 weeks. He said he'd try. The seat next to my mother stayed empty. He'd had a hearing run long. At 12, I stopped asking him to come to things. At 17, I was accepted into a summer linguistics program at Reed College. Full scholarship. I told my father over dinner. He nodded, said, "That's nice," and asked Marcus if he decided on his college major yet. That was the whole conversation. At 22, I graduated with honors. My father attended the ceremony. Afterward, he pulled me aside and told me I should consider law school, that I was wasting a good brain on children's therapy. I smiled. I said nothing. I drove back to my apartment and cried for exactly 12 minutes, then made a sandwich and watched television. I had learned to keep my grief small and time it. At 25, Marcus got married. My father paid $38,000 toward the wedding without being asked. He called it an investment in the family name. I was 26 and in a serious relationship. When I mentioned it at Christmas, my father asked if my boyfriend had a stable income and whether I'd considered that I was getting to the age where decisions matter. The relationship ended a year later for unrelated reasons. I didn't tell my father for 6 months. He didn't notice. My grandmother, my mother's mother, Eleanor Park, was the person who knew me. She lived 40 minutes from Bend, in a small craftsman house in Sisters, Oregon, with a vegetable garden out back and a bookshelf that covered an entire wall of her living room. I spent nearly every summer weekend there from age 9 to 18. She was the one who drove me to my piano recitals. She was the one who read my college essays and wrote comments in the margins in pencil, careful not to change my voice, only sharpen it. She was the one who, on the night of my 30th birthday, took my hand across her kitchen table and said, "I've taken care of things, sweetheart. For you. For when the time comes that you need a floor to stand on." I didn't understand what she meant. I laughed softly and told her she was being dramatic. She passed away 14 months later. A stroke, quiet and fast, the way she would have wanted. She left the house in Sisters to me entirely, outright, in a notarized trust she had established in 2019 and a savings account I hadn't known about, bearing my name and hers, with $61,000 in it. My father received a set of her books and a handwritten note she'd apparently left for him. He never told me what it said, but I saw his face when the attorney read the will. I understood then what the phrase "taking care of things" had really meant. She had made sure I had something that couldn't be taken from me. It was a Tuesday in August, 7:42 in the morning. I was in the bathroom of my apartment, getting ready for work, when I felt it, a firmness in my left breast, approximately the size of a marble. I stood very still for a moment. The faucet was running. I turned it off. I had a mammogram scheduled for the following Thursday, a routine one I'd been putting off. I moved it up. I went in on Friday. The radiologist's expression told me something before her words did. The biopsy came back the following Tuesday. Invasive ductal carcinoma. Stage 2B. The oncologist used words like aggressive and highly treatable in the same breath, which is one of the stranger experiences a person can have. I was 31 years old. I sat in a paper gown on an examination table alone because I had driven myself to the appointment, because I had not told anyone I was going, because I was, at my core, someone who had learned not to expect anyone to show up. I called my mother first. She cried. She said she would tell my father. I asked her not to yet. I needed a few days to process the treatment plan before I could manage other people's emotions on top of my own. She told him anyway. That same night, he called me at 9:18 p.m. "Claire," he said. His voice was low. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure the doctors will handle it." A pause. "Let us know if you need anything." Then he asked if I'd had a chance to look at the house in Sisters, whether I'd done anything with it yet. I hung up at 9:21 p.m. That was the last meaningful conversation my father and I had for the next 14 months. Chemotherapy started on a Monday in late September. 12 rounds of dose-dense AC, followed by 16 rounds of Taxol, 28 sessions in the first phase, then 13 more of targeted therapy after surgery. 41 total. Every Monday and sometimes Thursday. The smell of the infusion center, antiseptic, and something faintly sweet underneath it, like vinyl, became more familiar to me than the smell of my own apartment. I had a good team. My oncologist, Dr. Rupa Mehta, was calm and precise. My infusion nurse, a woman named Pat Caruso, had worked at Providence Cancer Center for 24 years. She remembered everyone's name. She remembered their kids' names. She kept a small bowl of peppermint candies at her station because she'd noticed they helped with the nausea that hit in the first hour. Pat was the first person who said out loud what I had been feeling but couldn't name. It was session 11, a Tuesday in December. I had arrived alone, as always. I had been watching a woman 2 recliners down get her hand held by her husband for the entire 90-minute infusion. I was trying not to look at them. Pat was changing my 4 bag. She glanced at the empty chair beside me and then at me, and she didn't say anything with her mouth. She just set her hand briefly on top of mine, just for a second, and moved on. Later, when she was writing up my chart, I said, "Does the log show visitors?" She looked up. "Yes," she said carefully. "It's part of the patient record. For support assessment." "How many have I had?" She was quiet for just a moment. Then, 0. I nodded. I looked at the bag dripping into my arm. I said, "Can I have a copy of the visitor log?" for my personal medical file. She said she'd have it ready the following Monday. That night, I opened my laptop. I created a folder on my desktop and titled it simply, Record. I didn't know then that I would need it. Or maybe I did. Maybe some part of me, the part that had timed its grief in 12-minute intervals since age 22, already understood that one day there would be a reckoning, and that when it came, I would need to be the most prepared person in the room. I started at the beginning. I went back through my texts with my father. In the 14 months since my diagnosis, there were 11 texts from him. I screenshotted all 11. 3 of them were group texts about holiday arrangements. 2 were forwarded articles, one about cancer research, one about diet. 6 were direct messages to me. I typed up a summary in a document. Most read some variation of "thinking of you, keep us posted." Not one said, "I'm coming." I went back through my call log. In 14 months, my father had called me 4 times. Durations: 8 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 11 minutes. The 11-minute call was the one about Grandma Eleanor's house. I opened my email. I searched his address. There were 6 emails. I screenshot them. Saved. Then, at 2:47 a.m., sitting on my bathroom floor because the nausea had come back and the cold tile helped, I found the one that made my hands go completely still. It was an email from my father to my mother, copied to Marcus. Sent in October, 6 weeks after my diagnosis, 2 weeks into my first chemo cycle. He had accidentally forwarded it to me. I don't know if he ever realized it. I had opened it at the time, glanced at the subject line holiday plans, and closed it, thinking it was just family logistics. Now I read the whole thing. The first paragraph was about Thanksgiving. The second was about Marcus's upcoming promotion. The third paragraph, in his precise, judicial prose, read, "As for Claire's situation, I think the best thing is to give her space to handle this without making it into a family event. She has her medical team. Getting too involved will only create dependency and drama. We should let her manage it and check in periodically. She's always been more resilient than she looks. She's always been more resilient than she looks." I read it 4 times. Then I screenshot it. Then I saved it to the record folder with the file name, October_email_full_scope. I didn't know it then, but that email would destroy him. Pat delivered the visitor log the following Monday in a sealed manila envelope. I opened it in my car in the Providence parking garage. The sheet was simple, dates in one column, visitor names in the other. 41 sessions. The visitor column, for every single date, read none. I sat with that document for a long time. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and cold concrete. A car alarm was going off 2 levels below. I thought about how many Mondays that was. How many Thursdays? I thought about the empty chair next to my recliner, session after session, while I watched other people get their hands held. I saved the visitor log as exhibit_A. Over the following weeks, I kept building. I requested an itemized statement from my insurance company and cross-referenced it with the medical bills I'd been paying out of pocket. My father had offered, exactly once, to help with costs if things got tight. I had told him what my out-of-pocket maximum was $7,400 for the year. He never asked again. Total I paid in medical costs during treatment, $9,217, because the second year reset the deductible. I added that to the file. I requested a formal summary of my treatment record from Dr. Mehta's office, dates, procedures, outcome notes. Saved. I printed the notarized copy of Grandma Eleanor's trust, the one that transferred the sister's property and the savings account to me. I put it in a physical folder, cream paper, blue ink, her signature at the bottom in that particular looping hand. I kept it in the locked drawer of my bedside table. I was not building a case for court. I was building a case for truth. For the moment, and I knew, by now, that the moment was coming when my father would stand in front of people he respected and ask me to perform my love for him publicly, and I would finally have the choice to perform something else entirely. 7 months into my treatment, on a Thursday evening in April, my phone rang. 6:52 p.m. My father. I answered. "Claire." He sounded buoyant. I recognized that tone. It was his announcement voice. I wanted you to be the first to know. I'm retiring. End of June. 32 years on the bench. I said, "Congratulations, Dad. We're hosting a dinner. Late July. The HEATHMAN, you know, the ballroom. Your mother's been planning it for months. 240 guests, colleagues, old friends, the whole thing." A pause. "I'd like you to give the opening remarks. You know, speak to what kind of father I've been. What I've passed down. You've always been a good speaker." I was quiet for 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10. "I'll think about it," I said. He took that as a yes. He moved on immediately to talk about the catering. I let him talk. When we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time without moving. Then I opened the record folder. Then I called my friend Nadia. I said, "I need you to help me with something. And I need you to not talk me out of it." She said, "I'm already in. What do we need?" I told her everything. The formal invitation arrived by mail on a Monday in June, thick cream cardstock, my father's monogram embossed at the top. Inside, Gerald Francis Donovan, retirement celebration, July 22nd, the HEATHMAN Hotel, Portland. Cocktail hour at 6 p.m., dinner at 7, remarks to begin at 8:30. My name was listed in the program my mother had mailed separately, a printed agenda she sent as a preview. Under 8:35 p.m., opening remarks, Claire Donovan, daughter. My mother had been calling more frequently in those weeks. She called every few days, chatty and warm in that particular way she got when she needed something to go smoothly. She wanted me to confirm my speech. She wanted to know what I was going to wear. She told me my father was so proud and really looking forward to it. I told her I was working on something special. She seemed satisfied with that. She didn't ask what. The truth was, I had been working on it for 3 months. Not a speech. Something else. I had been working with Nadia, who was a paralegal and had helped me organize the record folder into a clean, printable packet. Visitor log. Email screenshot. Call log summary. Medical cost itemization. Treatment timeline. All of it dated, sourced, tabbed. 16 pages total. Pat Caruso had agreed to attend the dinner as my guest. She'd said yes before I even finished asking. "I've seen a lot in 24 years, she told me over the phone. Not much surprises me. But an empty chair for 41 sessions, that stays with a person." I had also reached out, quietly, to my father's former colleague Judge Adele Prescott, who had been one of Grandma Eleanor's closest friends and who had long had a cool, watchful relationship with my father. I didn't tell her my plan. I simply asked if she was attending the retirement dinner. She said she was. I said I hoped to see her there. The morning of July 22nd was warm and clear. I was up at 6:14 a.m. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window of my apartment and watched Portland wake up, a jogger, a dog, the light turning the buildings a pale gold. I felt very calm. Not numb. Calm. There's a difference. Numb is the absence of feeling. What I had that morning was the presence of clarity. I showered. I put on a dress I had bought specifically for the evening, navy blue, fitted, simple. The kind of dress that says, "I am not dramatic. I am composed. I am the most prepared person in this room." I opened my closet and took out the camel-colored cashmere wrap my grandmother had given me on my 28th birthday. She'd bought it in London years ago on a trip she'd saved. 4. I hadn't worn it since she died. I put it around my shoulders. It still smelled faintly like her house and sisters, like cedar and something warm. I took the 16-page packet from my drawer. I slid it into a manila envelope and put it in my bag. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was 34 years old. I had been through 41 rounds of chemotherapy. I was in complete remission. I had a house and sisters, a career I had built without a single dollar from my family, and a folder full of evidence that told the truth about who my father was. I was ready. The HEATHMAN Hotel ballroom seated 260. By the time I arrived at 6:40 p.m., it was filling quickly. Round tables with white linens, crystal glasses catching the chandelier light and throwing small rainbows across the ceiling. A jazz quartet in the corner playing something low and warm. The room smelled like lilies and expensive cologne. My father stood near the entrance in a charcoal suit I recognized as his best one, accepting greetings with the easy confidence of a man entirely at home being celebrated. Beside him, my mother in a champagne dress, her smile practiced and genuine in equal measure. Marcus and his wife Kayla near the bar. 3 of my father's judicial colleagues in a cluster by the window. 32 years of professional relationships, attorneys, clerks, county commissioners, judges from 3 different circuits. 240 people who believed they knew Gerald Donovan. My father saw me from across the room and his face broke into a wide, warm smile. He crossed toward me. He put both hands on my shoulders and said, "There she is. You look wonderful, sweetheart." He hadn't called me that in years. "Thank you, Dad," I said. "Ready for tonight?" I smiled. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. He laughed and moved on to the next guest. He didn't notice that I wasn't laughing. I found Pat near the cocktail tables. She had worn a deep burgundy blazer. She squeezed my hand when she saw me. "You doing okay?" "Yes," I said. And I was. I know some of you right now are holding your breath. You know what's coming. If this is hitting close to something in your own life, you are not alone. Thousands of people have shared stories exactly like this one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. And drop a comment. What would you have done? Would you have walked away, or would you have stayed and said the truth? Tell me below. Because what happened next at 8:35 p.m. in that ballroom is what I want you to hear. Dinner was served at 7. I ate. The food was extraordinary. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted carrots with honey and thyme, warm bread. I ate slowly and deliberately. I drank 1 glass of water. I did not drink wine. Around me, the conversation was warm and nostalgic. Stories about my father's early days on the bench, jokes about cases that had long since closed, toasts to his legacy. I listened. I nodded. I smiled when people smiled at me. At 8:15, my mother leaned over and whispered, "You'll be up in about 20 minutes. Are you nervous?" "Not at all," I said. She patted my hand. "He's going to love it." I looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. She was genuinely happy tonight. She loved my father. Whatever his failings, she loved him, and this was her celebration too. I felt something soft and complicated for her, and I set it aside. At 8:30, my father's longtime clerk, Ben Hartley, took the microphone. He gave a 6-minute tribute, earnest, funny, clearly rehearsed. The room laughed in the right places. At the end, he said, "And now, someone who knew Gerald Donovan before the robes and the gavel, his daughter, Claire." The applause was warm. I stood. I walked to the front of the room. The microphone was at the edge of the small raised platform, and the room stretched out before me, 240 faces, crystal glasses, candlelight, my father at the head table wearing an expression of pride so comfortable it bordered on certainty. He was certain of what was about to happen. That was important. I didn't begin with remarks. I stood at the microphone and I said, "Before I begin, I want to ask my father something." A small ripple in the room. He looked up, still smiling. "Dad," I said, "do you know how many chemotherapy sessions I had?" The smile held for 2 seconds. Then it flickered. "Claire, it's a simple question," I said calmly. "How many?" He looked at my mother. She had gone very still. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10. I'm not sure of the exact number, he said. His courtroom voice. Still trying to hold authority. 41, I said. I had 41 sessions. They started on a Monday in September, 2 years ago. They ended the following October. Every Monday. Sometimes Thursday. The room was utterly silent. The jazz quartet had stopped. Someone in the back set a fork down on a plate, and the sound was very clear. How many of those sessions did you attend? I reached into my bag. I took out the manila envelope. I set it on the podium. I'm going to answer that for you, I said. I opened the envelope and took out the visitor log. I held it up, not dramatically, not with shaking hands. I held it up the way a judge holds up a piece of evidence. This is the official visitor log from Providence Cancer Center, Patient Services Department, corresponding to my treatment record from September of last year through October the following year. It is part of my official medical file. I paused. On every single line, In the column for visitor name, it reads, none. I heard a woman gasp somewhere to my left. My father pushed back his chair slightly. This isn't Dad. My voice was quiet. He stopped. I also want to read something. An email you sent to Mom and Marcus on October 14th. You accidentally copied me on it. I don't know if you remember. I took out the printed screenshot. I read the third paragraph aloud, the one about giving me space, about dependency and drama, about how I was resilient and could manage it on my own. I read it in a steady voice, looking up when I reached the last sentence. She's always been more resilient than she looks. I looked directly at him. I was resilient because no one gave me the option to be anything else. Marcus had put his hand over his face. Kayla was staring at the table. My mother had tears running down her face that she wasn't wiping away, as if she didn't want to acknowledge them. Judge Adele Prescott, 2 tables to my right, was watching my father with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression she used, reportedly, in the courtroom when a witness began lying under oath. My father tried once more. You're doing this here? In front of the people who think they know you, I said. Yes. I looked toward the entrance. Pat Caruso stood. She had been sitting at one of the tables near the back, and she stood now, quietly, and I said into the microphone, I'd like to introduce someone. Pat Caruso has been an infusion nurse at Providence Cancer Center for 24 years. She was present for every one of my 41 sessions. She signed the visitor log. Pat didn't speak. She didn't have to. She simply stood there in her burgundy blazer, 64 years old, with the particular quiet authority of someone who has held the hands of dying people and knows what presence actually costs. The room understood what her standing meant. Sit down, Claire. It was my father now, his voice low and hard, the voice he used when he was trying to end something. This is completely Gerald. Judge Prescott's voice cut across the room. She had not raised it. She didn't need to. Let her speak. My father turned toward her. Whatever he saw on her face, he closed his mouth. I took a breath. You called me 7 months into my treatment to ask me to come tonight and tell these people what a great father you've been. My voice was still level. It was important that my voice stayed level. I spent 3 years watching you celebrate Marcus. I spent 14 months receiving treatment for cancer while you checked in 4 phone calls, 11 texts, and I am not telling you that to punish you. I am telling you because I think in this room full of people who respect you, the truth should also be here. You don't understand. His voice cracked. You don't know the pressure, the court calendar, your mother's health issues that year you don't know. I know, I said gently, that the chair beside my recliner was empty for 41 sessions. I know what that feels like. I know it the way you know a thing that happens to your body. He was gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles had gone white. One of his clerk colleagues, a man named Thomas Abreu, who I had met twice at holiday parties, turned in his chair and said quietly to my father, Gerald, I think you might want to listen. My father didn't answer him. He was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. In 34 years, I had never seen him look small. He looked small. I looked out at the room. 240 people. The chandelier threw small rainbows across the ceiling. 7 months ago, I said, when you called me about tonight, I said I'd think about it. The real answer was no. But I came because I wanted to say something true in front of the people you spend your life performing for. I looked at him. You wrote in that email that I could manage it. That getting too involved would create dependency. That I was resilient. A pause. You were right, actually. I am resilient. I paid $9,217 in medical costs by myself. I drove myself to every session. I managed my own care, my own fear, my own recovery. I did manage it. I picked up the manila envelope. But I want you to hear this clearly, Dad, I didn't manage it because I'm strong. I managed it because you were absent. Those are not the same thing. I placed the envelope on the podium. 2 years ago, you said getting too involved would only create dependency and drama. So here is my answer to your invitation, Dad. I can't deal with this right now. I put the microphone down. I walked toward the door. My heels on the hardwood made a sound that was very clear in the silent room. I was 10 feet from the exit when I heard my father's voice behind me. Not the courtroom voice. Not the announcement voice. A voice I had never heard. Claire, please. I stopped. I turned. He had stood from the table. His face, that composed, dignified face that had presided over 32 years of other people's consequences, was broken open. His eyes were wet. His hands were at his sides, open, like a man who has run out of arguments. I'm sorry, he said. His voice was barely audible. I am so sorry. I didn't know how to. The room was absolutely still. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the empty chair. I thought about Pat's hand on mine. I thought about Grandma Eleanor at her kitchen table, saying, I've taken care of things. I thought about driving myself to the hospital on a Tuesday morning in August with a marble-sized thing in my chest and nobody to call. I hear you, Dad, I said. A pause. But you taught me that family shows up. And for 2 years, you didn't. I held his gaze. I hope that means something to you now. I turned. I walked out. The door swung shut behind me with a sound like finality. I sat in my car in the HEATHMAN parking garage for 22 minutes. I didn't cry immediately. I sat with the silence for a few minutes first. The engine was off. The garage was very quiet. Somewhere below me, a car door slammed. Then I cried. Not sharp sobs, not the crying of someone who is lost, the crying of someone who has finally put something down. A weight they've been carrying so long they'd forgotten it wasn't their natural posture. My phone buzzed. Pat, you were extraordinary, she wrote. Drive safe. Text me when you're home. And then one from Nadia. I've been sitting in my apartment refreshing my phone for the past hour. Call me. I smiled. I started the car. The messages started before I reached the interstate. My mother called 4 times that night. I let it go to voicemail. In the morning, I listened to the messages. The first 3 were her crying, saying my name, asking me to please call her. The 4th was different, her voice steadier, quieter. She said, I knew things weren't right between you and your father. I told myself it wasn't my place. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Claire. I love you. I held the phone for a long time after that one. Marcus called 2 days later. He left a voicemail that was 47 seconds long and mostly silence. At the end, he said, I should have known what was happening. I should have asked. I didn't. I'm sorry. 7 words that cost him something. I called him back. We talked for an hour and 15 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had since childhood. He cried. I mostly didn't, but I was glad he called. From my father, nothing for 8 days. Then a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. I will not share the full contents because some things are still private even now. I will say that he used the word inexcusable twice. I will say he wrote about the year my grandmother died, and that he had not processed her loss the way he should have, and that her trust in me had felt like a judgment against him, and that he had withdrawn when he should have moved toward. These are not excuses. He wrote that clearly. He wrote, these are not excuses. I read the letter twice. I placed it in a drawer. I did not respond. Not yet. From others, Judge Prescott sent a handwritten note 2 days after the dinner. It said only, your grandmother would be proud. I certainly am. I framed it. Thomas Abreu, my father's clerk colleague, reached out through LinkedIn. He wrote that what he had witnessed had given him pause about what we perform versus what we actually do, and that he appreciated the honesty. I thanked him. The HEATHMAN dinner, as I later heard from Nadia, who had sources in the city's legal community, became something people talked about. Not cruelly, or at least not only cruelly. My father's retirement was quieter than planned. Several colleagues who had been scheduled to join a celebration golf weekend quietly declined. For months after the dinner, I finally drove out to the house in Sisters. I had been avoiding it since Grandma Eleanor died. Going meant admitting that she was gone in a way that felt too final. But on a Saturday in November, I drove east on Highway 20, through the Ponderosa Pines, the morning air sharp and cold, and I pulled into the driveway of her craftsman house and sat there for a minute. The garden was overgrown. The porch needed painting. The key still worked in the lock. Inside, it smelled like cedar and memory. Her books were still on the shelf. There was a coffee mug on the kitchen counter that I recognized white with a small blue bird, and I stood at the counter holding it for a long time. That weekend, I decided to move. Not immediately, but within the year. I began speaking with colleagues about remote options. I researched what it would take to build a small private speech therapy practice in a town like Sisters. It was possible. More than possible. I was in complete remission. I had a house. I had $61,000 in a savings account that bore both my name and my grandmother's. I had a career and a reputation and friends who had held me up when I needed it. I had, finally, a floor to stand on. 6 months after the dinner, I had one more conversation with my father, in person, at my mother's request, in the backyard of my parents' house in Bend. He looked smaller than I remembered. He had lost weight. He seemed, for the first time in my memory, like a man who was uncertain about where to put his hands. We talked for 2 hours. I did not forgive him in the way that closes a wound neatly and produces a scar. What I offered him was something more honest, the acknowledgement that he was a man with failures and limits, and also, somewhere underneath all of it, a love that he had not known how to hold correctly. We are not close. We may never be, but we speak now, carefully, with a new understanding of what the word family actually costs. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 34 years old. I am in complete remission. I live in Sisters, Oregon, in a craftsman house with a vegetable garden I am slowly learning to tend and a bookshelf that covers most of one wall. I still have my grandmother's camel-colored cashmere wrap. I keep it on the back of my reading chair. On hard days, I put it around my shoulders. It is my reminder that someone who loved me thought far enough ahead to give me a floor to stand on, and that I had the courage, when the moment came, to stand on it. I think about the ballroom sometimes. The chandelier throwing small rainbows. The silence after I put the microphone down. The sound my heels made on the hardwood. I don't regret a single word. If you are watching this and you are nodding, you know what I'm talking about. You've sat in a recliner, or a waiting room, or a hospital bed, and watched the door and nobody came. Or someone came late, or came wrong, or came only when they needed something in return. Here is what I know now. Family is not who shares your blood. Family is who shows up. It is that simple and that hard. The people in your corner during the worst 14 months of your life, those are your people. Everything else is performance. Silence is not peace. I spent years being quiet because I thought my pain was the price of keeping things smooth. It wasn't peace. It was postponed pain, accumulating interest, until one evening in July when it finally became something else, the truth spoken out loud in a room full of people who needed to hear it. And the last thing, the one I want you to really hear. You do not owe anyone your performance of gratitude for things they never actually did. Not your parents. Not your family. Not anyone. Your job is to survive, to heal, to build, to become, slowly and imperfectly, the person you were when no one was watching, the person who drove herself to the hospital on a Tuesday morning and handled it, and handled it, and handled it. That person is enough. That person has always been enough. Some of you are thinking, was that too harsh? Was that the right place? 240 people? Let me tell you something. My father is a man who has spent 32 years making consequential decisions in front of audiences. He is a man who values reputation and standing and the good opinion of people he respects. He chose his retirement party as the venue when he asked me to perform my love for him publicly. I simply used the same stage he gave me. The cruelest thing we do to survivors is tell them that their truth is only acceptable in quiet rooms with closed doors. That they must protect their abusers from consequences while absorbing every injury in silence. I sat in a recliner for 41 Mondays with an empty chair beside me. I think I earned 10 minutes with a microphone. If this story reached you, if something in it reflected something you've been carrying, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me what boundary changed your life. Tell me what you wish you had said, or what you finally did say, or what you're still working up the courage to say. I read them, every one of them, and if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. There are more stories to tell. Take care of yourself. Really, I mean it.